Since their first game in 1888, Celtic have had just 20 managers. We're at the beginning of January, and this season they have had 3 different managers, with Martin O'Neill being in charge until the end of the season, having already been an interim for 37 days, 4 days longer than the permanent manager who replaced him, Wilfried Nancy, lasted for. This coming in a season where we have seen failure in European qualifiers. Again, mass protests against the board, a statement slandering a departing manager from a board member, an AGM where they decided to not bother with talking to fans, their worst domestic season since the COVID season with a cup final defeat to St Mirren, and their most league defeats in a season since 2012-13. Having already covered some of their troubles in a joint video with Rangers at the beginning of the season, I think it's time a dedicated video is made to answer the question: what on earth is going on at Celtic? On the pitch, the season started off as expected, with wins over St Mirren, Aberdeen and Livingston in the league, and a 4-1 win over Falkirk in the League Cup. The problems would show in Europe, however, where 2 lacklustre displays in front of goal against Kazakh side Kairat Almaty would lead to them getting knocked out on penalties, once again seeing Celtic fail to qualify through the Champions League qualifiers. This continues a record of not reaching the Champions League through the qualifiers since the 2017-18 season, with 2018-19 seeing Celtic draw at home and then lose away to Greek side AEK Athens, 2019-20 saw a defeat to Romanian side CFR Cluj at home, 2020-2021 they would be knocked out at the second qualifying round by Hungarians Ferencváros, with another second qualifying round defeat to Danish side Mechelen coming in 21-22. The past 3 seasons did see Champions League group stage and league phase football at Celtic Park, but that has been thanks to Scotland rising up the coefficient rankings, mainly due to Rangers actually getting somewhere, reaching a final in the Europa League in 2022. Since Rangers reached that final, however, the coefficient has dropped off enough for Scotland to lose places in the rankings, meaning whoever won the league was now not guaranteed league phase football. Even then, Kairat Almaty started the qualifiers in their first round as an unranked side, so really, Celtic should be beating them. On paper anyway. This would be followed up by an Old Firm derby that ended up being one of the worst in living memory, with John Sutter's disallowed goal being the only event of note. Celtic's next league game would see new signing Kelechi Iheanacho score a 96-minute penalty to win away against Kilmarnock. A penalty that was given after a shot deflected off a Killie player's foot onto another Killie's player's arm in what was later deemed incorrect by the key match incident panel. This would be followed up by a more convincing 4-0 victory against Partick Thistle in the League Cup quarter-final before things started to go really wrong. Their Europa League campaign would start with a 1-0 draw away against Red Star Belgrade, with the home side getting their equaliser through Marko Arnautovic. Yes, the same Arnautovic who played for Austria and West Ham. He's still playing. A return to league action would see a 0-0 draw against Hibs before losing 2-0 at home to Braga. A 3-2 win at home would come thanks to the away side shooting themselves in the foot rather than Celtic actually playing well, before a trip to Dens Park would see them lose away against Stephen Presley's Dundee for the first time since 1988. It was here where the pressure really ramped up with Brendan Rodgers complaining about his side, stating, "There's no way you'll go into a race and be given the keys to a Honda Civic and say, 'I want you to drive it like a Ferrari,' seemingly as a dig towards the club's recruitment." Celtic would finally get their first win in Europe after defeating 10-man Sturm Graz at home, but that weekend, a 3-1 defeat to Hearts at Tynecastle saw Celtic sitting 8 points behind their Edinburgh title rivals. This result would prove to be the end of Brendan Rodgers, and my word, what a messy departure this proved to be. It started off with a club statement released at 9:44pm, reading, "Celtic Football Club can confirm that football manager Brendan Rodgers has today tendered his resignation. It has been accepted by the club and Brendan will leave his role with immediate effect. The club appreciates Brendan's contribution to Celtic during his 2 very successful periods at the club. Brendan leaves Celtic with our thanks for the role he has played during a period of continued success for the club and we wish him further success in the future. The process to appoint a new permanent manager is underway and the club will update supporters further on this as soon as possible. We are pleased that during this interim period, former Celtic manager Martin O'Neill and former Celtic player Sean Maloney have agreed to take charge of Celtic first team matters. Further details will be confirmed shortly." A pretty normal statement, thanking Rodgers for his time at the club, announcing the new interim, and that a search for a new manager is underway. The only part of interest is that they have chosen Martin O'Neill, someone who hasn't held a managerial role since a 6-month stint at Nottingham Forest back in 2019, to be the interim manager. A bombshell statement, however, would be released by Dermot Desmond just 15 minutes later. Brendan Rodgers has today tendered his resignation as manager of Celtic Football Club. I want to acknowledge Brendan's contribution across his 2 spells as manager, during which he helped deliver success that forms part of the club's modern history. However, I must also express my deep disappointment at the way the past several months have unfolded. When we brought Brendan back to Celtic 2 years ago, it was done with complete trust and belief in his ability to lead the club into a new era of sustained success. Unfortunately, his conduct and communication in recent months have not reflected that trust. In June, both Michael Nicholson and I expressed to Brendan that we were keen to offer him a contract extension to reaffirm the club's full backing and long-term commitment to him. He said he would need to think about it and revert. Yet, in subsequent press conferences, Brendan implied that the club had made no commitment to offer him a contract. That was simply untrue. We met with Brendan regularly, including in December last year and at the start of the summer, with regular dialogue in between to discuss and agree our collective strategy, priorities and approach. Every player signed and every player sold during his tenure was done so with Brendan's full knowledge, approval and endorsement. Any insinuation otherwise is absolutely false. His later public statements about transfers and club operations came entirely out of the blue. At no point prior to those remarks had he raised any such concerns with me, Michael, or any member of the board or executive team. In reality, he was given final say over all football matters and was consistently backed in the recruitment process, including record investment in players he personally identified and approved. When his comments were made publicly, I sought to address them directly. Brendan and I met for over 3 hours at his home in Scotland to discuss the issue. Despite ample opportunity, he was unable to identify a single instance where the club had obstructed or failed to support him. The facts did not match his public narrative. Regrettably, his words and actions since then have been divisive, misleading and self-serving. They have contributed to a toxic atmosphere around the club and fueled hostility towards members of the executive team and the board. Some of the abuse directed at them and at their families have been entirely unwarranted and unacceptable. Every member of the board and executive team is deeply passionate about Celtic and acts at all times with professionalism, integrity and a shared desire for success. What has failed recently was not due to our structural model, but to one's individual desire for self-preservation at the expense of others. Celtic structure, where the manager oversees football, the chief executive manages operations and the board provides oversight, has served the club with great success for more than 2 decades. We all share the same ambition, to ensure Celtic's continued success domestically and to achieve further progress in Europe. Every pound generated by the club is reinvested towards those goals and the continuous improvement of Celtic Football Club. Celtic is greater than any one person. Our focus now is on restoring harmony, strengthening the squad and continuing to build a club worthy of its values, traditions and supporters.
That was really bad.
Well, that was certainly a statement. If there is anything worth talking about from this, it has to be the section about player recruitment, because Celtic's recruitment hasn't been the greatest in recent years. Going back to Ange's last game in charge against Inverness in the Scottish Cup final back in 2023, you can see there has been a drop in quality. Jota would be sold to Al Ittihad in Saudi Arabia for £25 million, with his replacement being Luis Palma, who was signed for £4 million. Palma has spent the last few seasons on loan at Olympiacos and Lech Poznan, while Jota has since returned to Celtic via Stade Rennais for £8 million, but has only played 11 of the 20 league games as of the time of writing, scoring 4 and assisting 3. Leo Abada was sold to Charlotte FC for £6 million, with his replacement being Nicholas Kuhn, who last season scored 21 and assisted 15 in all competitions, before being sold to Como for £17 million. Who is he replaced by? Benjamin Negron for £1 million, who, to be fair, has been alright. Matt O'Reilly was sold to Brighton for £25 million, with his replacement being Arne Engels for £10 million, who has really underdelivered this season with just 3 goals and 1 assist in 19 league games. Kyogo was sold for £10 million, and his replacement was the permanent slagging of on-loan striker Adam Ida for £8 million, who proceeded to score just 8 league goals and was sold this summer to Swansea, and now as of time of writing, it is rumoured that Kyogo is set to return on loan from Birmingham, having failed to score in the Championship this season. Evidently, the recruitment in these past few years has been lacking, especially when you see players being sold for huge profits only to be replaced by either former players or players costing a tenth of those they are replacing. You can even stretch this replacing a player with the same person a few years down the line method to Kieran Tierney if you want to. Back on the pitch, meanwhile, Martin O'Neill has managed to get a tune out of the squad, with his first game being a thumping 4-0 win over Falkirk. This was followed by an extra time win at Hampden against Rangers in the League Cup semi-finals, and whilst they would lose away to Midtjylland in the Europa League, they would bounce back with a 4-0 win against Kilmarnock, a late win against St Mirren, a 3-1 win away at Feyenoord, and a 2-1 win away against Hibs before a 1-0 win against Dundee in what would be the last game of O'Neill's interim period. This wasn't down to being hired permanently due to his impressive form, but a new man had been hired. Wilfried Nancy. Nancy was a relative unknown before coming to Celtic, but across the Atlantic, he was highly rated. He started his managerial career at CF Montreal, following the resignation of Thierry Henry, and would have success in Quebec, with a Canadian Championship being won against Toronto just 3 months into his tenure, guaranteeing Montreal a place in the CONCACAF Champions League. 2022 would see Montreal reach for the quarterfinals of the Champions League before being knocked out by Mexican side Cruz Azul, but domestically they finished the regular season in second place in the Eastern Conference with a franchise record of 20 wins and 65 points, but they would lose in the playoff semi-finals against New York City. The following season he would move to Columbus Crew, and whilst I'm here, can we point out how much a downgrade their badges have been? Bring back the men in hard hats. His first season would see Columbus finish third in the Eastern Conference before defeating Atlanta United, Orlando City, FC Cincinnati and LAFC to win his first and Columbus's third MLS Cup, also becoming the first black manager to do so. The 2024 season would see Columbus finish third in the regular season, but in the Cups, they would end up winning the League Cup, a weird MLS Liga MX competition where they beat LAFC 3-1 in the final, while they would reach the final of the Champions League, where they would lose 3-0 to Mexican side Pachuca, whose top scorer in the competition as a whole, and who would score twice in that game, was Salomon Rondon. The MLS playoff campaign, however, would end at the first hurdle, with New York Red Bulls winning both legs. 2025, however, did see Columbus drop down to 7th in the Eastern Conference, but it was still enough to qualify for the playoffs. After losing the first game against Cincinnati 1-0, they would win the second game 4-0, where, in any normal competition, would see Columbus through on aggregate. Unfortunately, this is America, where it is a best-of-3 series, so a third game was played, which Cincinnati won 2-1 to go through. A pretty decent record, I would say, but Nancy was known for playing attractive football with his 3-4-3 formation. If he was coming in back in June and given a full pre-season, then it would give him time for the current players to get used to his system, along with recruiting players who would fit said system, rather than relying on Liam Scales. Unfortunately for Nancy, he was coming in December, with 3 games in the next week, the first of which being against High Flyers Hearts. All Hearts needed was Claudio Braga to open the scoring just before half-time, before Oisin McKenty would double Hearts' lead after 64 minutes. Whilst Kieran Tierney would get a goal back in the 93rd minute, Hearts would hold on to win at Celtic Park and go 3 points clear. Nancy's European debut would see a convincing 3-0 defeat to Roma at Celtic Park, before a trip to Hampden to face St Mirren for the League Cup final. Despite some sections of the fanbase complaining about Celtic not getting 75% of the ticket allocation, those who did miss out proved to be the lucky ones, as St Mirren would deservedly beat Celtic 3-1 to win their first major honour since 2013, and Celtic's second cup final defeat of 2025. So, a not ideal start for Nancy, but up next was Dundee United, who had failed to win any of their last 7 matches. Dyson Maeda would open the scoring to give Celtic a thoroughly deserved lead, and with the way the first half was going, it seemed as if Nancy would get his first win. A 3-minute double from Dundee United, including a screamer from Zach Sapsford, and Celtic doing everything but score. Looking at you, Maeda, missing an open goal. Dundee United would come away with the win, with their post-match graphic on social media referencing a previous post from Nancy's now private social media. This game also saw chants from the Celtic fans telling Nancy to leave the club, to put it nicely, which, after 4 games, is not exactly what you want. To be fair, he did set a record. The first Celtic manager to lose 4 games in a row since Jock Stein back in 1978. Thankfully, Aberdeen would travel to Celtic Park and Nancy would avoid defeat, getting a 3-1 win at home, followed by a 4-2 win away against bottom side Livingston. Just ignore that Celtic went behind twice in the opening 8 minutes. These back-to-back wins would not see Celtic kick on, however, as they would be comfortably beaten by Motherwell 2-0 at Fir Park. The first time Motherwell had beaten Celtic since 2015, and the first time at Fir Park since 2013. This was a real missed opportunity in the title race, as Hearts had lost to Hibs, and now they would go into their first match of 2026 3 points behind them. All of this led into the biggest game of Nancy's tenure, the Old Firm derby. An incredible solo goal from Yang would give Celtic the lead after 19 minutes. Maybe this was the turning point for Nancy, and with a transfer window now open, he can get the players in required to play his style. This is it. This is where it all starts to click. A disastrous second half with Chamiti scoring twice and Mickey Moore getting a third would see Rangers come from behind to win 3-1 and move level on points with Celtic. Yes, Rangers were now level with Celtic. They were 9 points behind when Martin was sacked, and now just 13 games later, they were now only behind on goal difference. This would prove to be the end of Wilfried Nancy, who was sacked after just 8 games and 33 days in charge. A tenure that was outlasted by Neil Warnock at Aberdeen, Liz Truss's lettuce, and Martin O'Neill as interim manager. Speaking of Martin O'Neill, it was confirmed by the club that he would once again be the interim manager, this time until the end of the season, which at least gave some hope for fans that they can still win something. The Herald would later release an article detailing how things went so wrong for Nancy. In the article, it is claimed that training sessions were of the same standards as what you would get in academies, with James Forrest, someone who has been playing for Celtic for 17 seasons now, being stopped during a drill to be told how to open up his body and receive the ball. Brendan Rodgers has previously called him one of the best at receiving the ball in tight spaces. There would be a lack of opposition analysis with players not being told on what to expect from opposition teams. Nancy forced the team to go straight into his 3-4-3 system with only 1 training session before their game against Hearts. In said game, his back 3 was Kieran Tierney, Liam Scales and Austin Trusty, all 3 of which are left-footed, which brings about problems when one is forced to play on the right side of the pitch. And when it came to the other games, there was a lack of changes that actually made sense, with any changes being immediately counteracted by other managers, something that is easily done when they can see your magnetic tactics board. Now, to give some form of sympathy to Nancy, he had been thrown straight into the pits of hell that is the Celtic season, without a pre-season or a chance to acclimatise to Scottish football. Ignore his comments about Carlisle. The MLS is very different from managing in Europe, with there being no relegation and 18 of the 30 teams qualify for postseason playoffs, meaning there is a lot less pressure on managers to get things working right away. Scottish football especially does not have that privilege, with an automatic relegation spot and a relegation playoff spot, meaning that up to 2 teams of the 12 can get relegated. Celtic takes this pressure to a whole other level, where you are obligated to win every game seemingly. Every loss is treated as a disaster, and a poor run of form will very easily see fans turn against you, potentially losing you your job. Nancy wasn't the only departure, however, as it was also announced that head of football operations Paul Tisdale had also been sacked, one of the many higher-ups that the Celtic fans had been protesting about. Tisdale himself had only held consultancy roles at Exeter City, Milton Keynes, Bristol City and Stevenage. He was the one in charge of recruitment, which has proven to be disastrous this summer, with Tisdale reportedly ignoring things such as player data, which the club had paid for, and was the man who hired Nancy, with the aforementioned Herald article mentioning how Tisdale had told an audience of supporters that Nancy bought into the club's strategy in a way Brendan Rodgers never did. I'd say the big difference, Tisdale, is that Rodgers actually won games. When it comes to the rest of the board, however, it comes to how the club's finances are being managed. Celtic for the past 15 years have been untouchable when it comes to money. When looking at the club's accounts, the last set of accounts to show a loss before taxation, not including COVID, are from all the way back from the 2014-15 season. This has been thanks to their player trading model bringing in constant profits and qualification for European competitions, especially the Champions League group stages. 2024 saw profits of 13.3 million, with 2023 seeing profits of 33.3 million, with the profits from previous years accumulating to net assets of about £56 million. This money hoarding is what has annoyed Celtic fans. It is something that arguably shows a lack of ambition. When Rangers went under in 2012, Celtic were now untouchable domestically, so you would expect the board to try and invest to start making progress in Europe. Since 2012, however, Celtic have made it out of the group stages 7 times out of a possible 13, once making it out of the Champions League group, once making it through the Champions League phase, once finishing 3rd in the Champions League group and qualifying for the Europa League, 3 times making it out of their Europa League group, and 1 other time where they finished 3rd in the Europa League group and dropped into the Conference League knockouts. Of the 14 games they have been involved in, they have won once against Zenit St. Petersburg in the 2017-18 Europa League, a tie they would eventually lose 3-1 on aggregate. For a club of Celtic's size, this is unacceptable, especially when combined with the money hoarding and constant profits. Since 2012, Celtic have only spent more than £10 million or more on 2 players, Jota and Engels. If we compare this to a club of a similar stature in Benfica, they did that on 4 players this summer alone, and they are a club notorious for making big profits on players, with 2024-25 seeing them spend £72.9 million, financed by player sales totalling £144.8 million. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that Celtic spend over £20 million on multiple players, but when you sell players for £25 million, their replacements should be costing more than £5 million. Even if you want to go down the cost-effective method, you would think the academy will have seen some success, right? This season, the only academy player to make any appearances has been Colby Donovan. There are also the actions that the board has taken against some sections of Celtic fans, namely the Green Brigade, one of the main ultras groups who have received multiple bans for their behaviour and constantly holding up banners against the board. This would all come to a head at the club's AGM, where the board would walk into the room, only to be greeted with boos and red cards being brandished by supporters. This led to the meeting being delayed by half an hour before they started playing pre-made videos, which the fans never saw as they walked out in protest. Ross Desmond would then read out a pre-written statement from his dad, Dermot Desmond, who is the largest individual shareholder in the club, which went down well, with the statement constantly calling the fans bullies before ending the meeting early without hosting a Q&A. This, followed by the Nancy debacle, has only worsened relations between the board and fans, with mass gathering happening outside the offices following their defeat to Rangers, where board members were seen pointing and laughing at frustrated fans. As the January window opened up then, Martin O'Neill said that Celtic definitely need to supplement the squad. Celtic would go about this by getting Julian Araujo on loan from Bournemouth, who made his debut in the defeat against Rangers. Of course, there are the rumours of Kyogo returning, but those seem unlikely. But a deal which seems to have more concrete rumours around it is a deal to sign Ivorian winger Jocelyn Tabi for £2 million. This seems like a normal piece of business until you realise that Tabi plays for Maccabi Netnaya in Israel, a club owned by investment firm Alia Capital Partners, who have a major stake in Extend, an Israeli military drone manufacturer. Celtic are a club known for their pro-Palestine stances, especially in the last couple of years. Even then, there is also the existence of Lagi Celtic, a sports club supported by Celtic fans that helps Palestinian refugees in Gaza. This has obviously led to increased calls for boycotts, an action some fans had been calling for prior to this, if this deal was to go through. For a boycott to be successful though, and for those in charge to decide to get up and leave, a lot more would need to go wrong. Evidently, all the board cares about is money. So when it comes to fans boycotting, it is a case of not buying any merchandise, tickets, season ticket renewals, etc. until Celtic Park is as empty as it was in the early 90s, where the average attendances were less than 25,000. When it comes to on-the-pitch performances, well, it can only get better with Martin O'Neill, especially after they beat Dundee United 4-0 on his return. But if Hearts were to win the league, I can see that giving the board the kick up the backside needed to make changes and modernise. Chris Boyd made a great point recently. I know it's Chris Boyd. But he suggested that because Rangers have been so poor in recent years, the Celtic board have gotten complacent and instead of aiming high, have decided to simply stay above their city rivals. It seems then that the best chance for a Celtic reset is to not win any trophies, something not seen since 2010. Whilst we are yet to see metal sharks outside the stadium like in the COVID season, it seems for Celtic fans, things are going to have to get a lot worse for things to get better. Well, that's all for this video, and of course, I hope you enjoyed. How do you see the rest of the season going for Celtic? What do you think needs to happen for things to change, or are you simply sitting back and enjoying the chaos that is unfolding? Let us know in the comments below. Channel memberships are available. Those who have signed up have their names on screen now. Of course, liking, sharing and subscribing are all appreciated, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.